Hi, welcome to the Dream Factory community. My name is Nancy Cantor. I'm your hostess today. The Dream Factory is an organization for women in the Metro West area that has communities in Concord, Reading, Framingham, and Medway, and it is designed to support women in taking on their life, their work, and their world. And as a result, women find themselves living their dreams. Now, on this show, what I do is I interview my members who I feel are good examples of people who are taking on something new, living their professional dreams, but in the process also helping others live theirs. So today I have the privilege of speaking with Martha Schwope. She's one of our Concord members. She is a writer, and she helps people document their family stories and really get a sense of, what's happened within the family that people want to know about. So I'm very excited to have her here today. Welcome, Martha.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. So I'm just going to ask you, not everybody is a family documenter, right? I mean, I haven't met too many of them. So I want to hear a little bit about your background and what brought you into this interesting kind of profession.
Well, what started it all was my own family. After my grandparents died, I realized that their stories were gone, that everything that they could have told me, they could never tell me again. And so I decided that I would record what was left of their stories. And I interviewed all my aunts and all my uncles, and I got the stories of all four grandparents' lives. And in the process, also was able to document all the stories of every ancestor that they could remember. So I was able to preserve all our family memories. I feel very good about that.
So how did you share it with the rest of your family? Like, how do you put this together in a way that other people can access it?
I made copies of the stories for all of my aunts and uncles, and almost all of my cousins, the ones that I was in touch with. I just made copies and gave them out. And that made such a difference for me that I wasn't expecting. Having been one of the younger members of two large families, all of a sudden I was the family historian. I was the one who knew. And to this day, I go to family reunions and people have either new pictures for me or new stories or thank me again. It's wonderful.
And then do you put it together? I know you do this professionally now.
Yes.
So when you do a family story, it sounds like you talk to different members of the family. Is that correct?
I can do it in different ways. I can talk to several members of the family and put the story together, or I can talk with one member of the family and just record what that person has to say and put it in story form so that it becomes a written document. It's wonderful when people talk with their relatives and get their voices, or they have a video and have a video of what the person looked like. But the way I put things together is in a different form. It's accessible in a different way.
So it's more of a book that they're going to read.
It's a book.
And does it have pictures?
Yes.
Okay, so it has all the cast of characters.
It does.
Of the family, and you turn it into a story based on the stories they've told you about the people in the family.
Right.
So what kind of, I know, somebody could commission you.
Yes.
And that might make a difference for them. How do you think it makes a difference for the family? What kinds of experience have you had in being, even like for your own family, you started being the historian. What kind of results did you see, or what kind of changes did you see from doing that for people?
It unites the family. These are very personal stories, but they're not personal to an individual. They're personal for the whole family, and they're meaningful for the whole family. I have a lot of cousins, and we all had the same grandparents, and now we're united by the stories of the grandparents. We all know where we come from. We have an identity. It unites us in a way that we didn't used to have. We were ready to just flake off and go in our different ways.
So it's a way of bringing families together.
Absolutely.
To make them realize that they're connected through the stories that they have.
And there are occasions when people have asked me to write these stories for special occasions, like anniversaries or bar mitzvahs, or really special occasions in people's lives where I will write the story after having interviewed one or two people or more. make a copy, give the copy to the person who asked for it, and then they'll make copies for everybody who comes to the party.
Well, that's a great idea.
It's fun.
And I can just imagine as they're passing out this book that you put together for everybody, that everybody starts reading and sharing the stories. And, it is a way of bringing people together in a different kind of way. And there might even be stories that not everybody's heard.
Oh, yes.
I mean, if you have 10 cousins, not everybody has the exact same story. Like they might have different perspectives on something that happened, or they experienced something that the other people didn't.
Which gets me to a point that at the end of the story, I always say, as told by whoever it is I interviewed, because somebody might have some different kind of story entirely, and we just want to be sure that this is the way that the story was told by this person.
Okay, so you document who said it.
Yes, absolutely.
So people know this is where the story came from.
Right.
So if they have questions, they could go back to that particular person.
If they're still alive, and
Yeah.
a lot of the people that I've interviewed are no longer alive.
Really?
Those stories would have died with them, but they're here.
So when would you say is a good, that brings up timing. Because a lot of times in retrospect, you think about doing something, but then it might be a little bit too late. So when do you recommend that people start looking at this?
Right away.
Right.
Yes,
It's
really.
like buying insurance, right?
Exactly.
You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly, and I was leading a group recently where one of the women had a question about something that happened with her grandmother, and she went to go ask her sister about it, and her sister had forgotten. Just in the time that it took from one day to the next, this older member of the family had forgotten the family history, and it gets lost. I always had this feeling when my grandparents died that I lost them. And I didn't want to lose any more of them. I wanted to keep them. I wanted them close to me. I wanted to know them. I wanted to be part of them. So the people who carry the stories tend to be our older members of our families. And their memories become less and less reliable. But they're the ones who hold the stories. And if we don't write them down or remember them in some way that's just beyond talking about it, those stories are gone.
So what you're saying is that people should think about the people in their families and think about the stories that only they hold.
Right, exactly.
Because if you do want to know where you've come from,
Exactly.
you need to speak to somebody who's come way before you.
Yes.
So that you have a sense of that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And if people did this in a consistent way, it could go back further and further in time if people did it that way.
So I have written the long stories of my parents. I was lucky enough to be able to interview them directly. I have stories that are maybe 15 to 20 pages of each of my grandparents. And I have maybe a page or two, or just a little bit of a story about the ancestors before them. But my children and my family's children, my sisters and brothers' children, my cousins' children, will have all of that.
So give me an example of one of the stories that's meaningful. Like it could be something that you wrote about your family that's meaningful to you, or a story that you told for one of your clients and that it was meaningful for them. But, I want an example of the meaning that people find in these stories. Just a slight example of it.
My parents were young adults during the Depression, and both of them were school teachers. And both of them were older members of large families whose fathers had died. So they, at that time in the country, there was a law that only one member of a married family would be able to live at government expense. And so these two people who were both living at government expense, as it were, being teachers, would not be able to continue, both working once they got married. They put the marriage off for 3 years while they continued to support their families until the younger children grew up old enough to be able to support them themselves. And my mother says, and that was the day, Martha, when engagement meant engaged, and that's all. It can be done. And there are a lot of funny stories that go along with that. But the stories have values that go along with them. I see so often that whatever random stories make their way through our memories tend to be something important to us in some way, whether we realize it at the time or not. But that story means a lot to me in terms of the way I respect and love my family and will do what I can to support it, even if it means 3 years of doing something I would rather not be doing or whatever.
Wait, so there's something about instilling values, or
Absolutely.
getting a sense of values that you've inherited that you didn't necessarily know you even inherited.
Absolutely. There's one, so in the group I was leading recently, there was one woman who the only thing she had was a sentence about a great-grandparent and 2 great-grandparents who were married to each other, that they loved each other and loved being parents. That's all she had. And what a blessing to know that your great-grandparents loved children and loved having children. Who would know that if it hadn't been preserved?
Well, there's a real sweetness in that.
Absolutely.
That maybe you're not sitting there wondering if your grandparents loved having children.
Yes.
But finding out that they did.
Yes.
Would color everything.
Not to be too sweet about it, also there are tragedies, there are catastrophes, there are things that break our hearts and continue to break our hearts and help us to understand each other in ways where our hearts are broken. I wrote the story of a woman whose sister died in childbirth. It was a terrible moment to hear about that. I've written stories where people have started to cry when they tell about, a man telling about how his mother used to play the piano, and he started to tell the pieces she used to play, and he started to cry over the phone. Because I can do these interviews over the phone. They touch really warm human parts of us.
Well, it sounds like that is kind of at the heart of it, is to feel this human connection.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about remembering. I think in our fast-paced society, we're always on to the next thing. And I have to say, in hearing what you're having to say today, it makes me think about, my parents. And what stories do I have about them? Or what did I actually really even know about my grandparents?
Yes.
My parents were married, when World War II was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were together for a few months, and then my father left for 4 years.
Oh my.
Because he was a navigator bombardier in the Army Air Force.
Oh my.
And he went to Okinawa.
Oh gracious.
And I do remember my father telling, on Saturdays, I do remember this about my father. My father would not let us watch cartoons on Saturday. Like all the other kids got to watch cartoons. And I have to say, at the time, I was really mad about that. Because I thought, being a kid, you just want to watch cartoons. But what he would do every Saturday is he would make breakfast. And I actually, at my home, I still have the griddle that he used to. He used to make
nice.
pancakes.
Oh, nice.
In the griddle.
There.
And I'm wondering if the pan I have a Farberware pan, but it was the same pan that my mother had. And he would make eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And he would make us breakfast.
Mm.
And then he would tell us stories.
Oh my.
And it was always stories about when he was overseas.
Oh my.
And he would make things up. Like he would, because he would have coffee and he'd say, "Did I ever tell you about the time that I became the champion cream pourer, when I was overseas?" And I'd be like, "No, you never told me that," which he would probably tell me every week.
Yes.
And I'd say, "Tell me more about that."
Mm-hmm.
And so he would make up, every week he would make up a little bit different story about
Oh, isn't that funny?
Or he goes, "Did I ever tell you about how I was the champion sugar shaker?"
Uh-huh.
And then, he would make up something about that because it was all the things he would do around his coffee. And then he always had pictures. And he would have pictures of the planes.
Uh-huh.
And, they'd always have women on the front of the planes. They were very interesting. And he would have pictures. They used to go to Hawaii for R&R, for rest and relaxation, I guess, after they did their mission. So there's always pictures of him with other guys. They were playing golf, and they had one picture, I remember, of him with pineapples, because they grew pineapples there. So he had a couple of pineapples. There's a picture of him, and I thought, that's so cool. He got to have a fresh pineapple. And I think to this day, I've never been, but I've always wanted to go to Hawaii.
There you go. Yes.
So there is something about that story that
Connects.
connects.
It does. It gives more meaning to life there are parts of it that you feel that are important. You're connected to Hawaii somehow.
Somehow, and I was just actually thinking, I wonder if I could figure out where he was based on the pictures.
There you go.
Like if you showed the pictures to somebody in
neat.
Hawaii, could they actually pinpoint like where he actually was?
Huh. Mm-hmm.
And that would be really cool. And then they had one picture of him. He was very handsome. It was a picture of him, and I guess while he was overseas, they did a symbolic ceremony for his anniversary. And there was a picture of my mother and wedding bells, and he's standing there and a group of guys.
Oh, nice.
It was just very sweet. So,
Yes.
kind of showed maybe more of his romantic side.
Which it never does us any harm to know of our parents' romantic sides.
Yes, yes.
Good thing to know about.
So now you've got me in my head thinking about stories.
That's what happens.
But it's interesting. Like, I think unless there is somebody like you saying they're important, how would you even think they were important?
That's right. And a lot of people don't. There tends to be one person in the family, of the people who have contacted me at all, one person tends to recognize that these stories are wonderful and need to be preserved. Then everybody else follows behind and says, oh, yeah, you're right. And sometimes they will split the cost, for instance, among the different siblings in order to write about their grandparents. But I don't know how it is that people either know it. Sometimes it's a question of age. It seems that people coming into their 50s to all of a sudden say, oh my, what did happen then, Dad? Stories that they've been told over and over again till they're tired of them, all of a sudden they want to know them again, want to hear them again. And one of the saddest things that can happen is that a parent can die and you can realize you don't remember the stories you used to tell. What was it that he used to talk about all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it is easy to forget.
Forgetting seems to be part of the human condition, and that was something I did not want to forget. I tend to have a forgetful mind. I, put my keys in the wrong place. It happens. And I was very, very clear in myself. I did not want to forget my grandparents. I never even knew my grandfathers. I got to know them. I got to know my grandfathers. And I got to know my grandmothers better, too, and all of their mothers and fathers.
Well, speaking of stories, I remember once we did, when my mother, I have one sister, and my mother was turning 80.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided, she's in good health, why not do a really wonderful celebration for her birthday?
Excellent.
So we invited a lot of people to come, and then we also invited people to write, we said cards, send cards with any stories or anything that you remember.
Nice.
And it helped me to know my mother better, because I didn't realize some of the things that she had done. Like she used to work at Hanson's Electric for many years. And one of the guys there, I guess she helped him meet his wife somehow. I can't remember exactly how she did that, but they got married and they had a daughter. And she was very, just involved in this little girl's life. She would go to her play.
Nice.
Like sort of like a surrogate grandmother kind of person, because I think their relatives were, probably lived in Michigan or someplace further away. And the girl wrote this really sweet letter about how much she appreciated my mother's presence at these events, and that all my nice jewelry I got from Grandma Martha.
Wow.
I thought that was like the sweetest thing. So that was one thing. And then we got a letter from her friends when my parents are from New York, and they're first friends in New York. And they have two girls my age and my sister's age. So my mother and her name was Irene were really good friends. And this is the thing that made me cry. I don't think I'll cry today, but this woman got polio. Her friend got polio, and she wrote this note saying that my mother was the only person who stayed in touch with her and helped her. Like other people were too afraid.
Oh, Nancy.
And my mother wasn't. Like she honored their friendship. And I could, that there was something that I learned about my mother and our friendship that I absolutely didn't know.
Oh, my.
And that my mother would help watch the girls and just
Oh,
stayed in touch
my.
and, you know, really supported her in a way that maybe other people didn't. And so it helped me to realize the depth of, you know, those two stories made me realize
Oh,
other
my.
people. I mean, I have my own experiences
Yes.
of my mother
Right.
that are very positive, and I know the kind of person she is or was. And but those two stories, I realized how special she was to other people, and
Oh, that's
the
wonderful.
character that she had. You know, like what she made important very much fits my values as well.
Well, look at you. What do? Is you support women
Yeah.
as they build their lives and live out their dreams. That's
Yeah.
could,
So it's kind of nice to know that, you know, my mother really was part of that. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I just one day I woke up and I made that up.
yes.
It's a product of, you know, who my mother was, and a product of who my father was. You know, like my father was somebody who could have stuck us in front of a TV and spent his Saturdays talking to his children. That, you know, like that makes me feel very, like, makes me honor the important parts of my family, the important parts of my parents, as opposed to, well, when I was a kid, I didn't like it so much. You know, and my father was pretty rigid and he had some really strict rules. And that tends to be how I relate to my father, you know, when I think about him. But in sharing that story, what do I hear? Well, I hear and I see somebody who really wanted to spend time with his kids and didn't want to just stick them in front of a television. But she could have very easily and gone off and done something else that he wanted to do. But what he wanted to do was spend time with his girls.
And Saturday morning cartoon time was just the right time for him.
Yeah, I mean, I wished he would have planned it later in the day.
Yes,
or
well,
something.
you
But,
do what you can do.
You know, but it's just really interesting there. I think there is something about the stories that makes you appreciate the people more.
Yes.
You know, it's so human. Like, stories are so human.
Oh, my, yes.
And then also appreciate yourself more, like where you got what you got.
Absolutely.
You know, that it is connected to something. It isn't just like we're all islands who invent ourselves, but that our community, and that's, you know, very big in the Dream Factor, is how do you create a community of support?
Yes.
I think there's something about honoring the community of support that you've had and probably still do have. You know, you're familiar.
Right.
Familial? I guess that's
Yes.
familial family, you know? That we're out building communities, and, you know, it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
Right.
And there's always lots of things we didn't like. But I think there is something very, I don't know, transformational about appreciating our families and what we've been given, you know, through our lineage.
And in this day and age when families are so far flung, it's hard sometimes to feel even attached to them. You know, we raise our children alone with our little village that makes a build a child or whatever. But
To build a child, yes.
Right.
Takes a village to
grow a child.
Grow a child, support a child.
Whatever. The fact is that the people who are all over, this is how I started, is saying it's not just my personal story that I would be writing down, it's my family's story. And no matter where my family is all over the world, this brings us together. And the family is the next connection to our community. We have ourselves, then we have our family, then we have our community and such. It's nice to have that family be really solid, to know who they are, to have an identity together that we share.
Yeah. And so that's the work that you do, is you
That's
help
what
people
I do.
build that.
I do.
See, I think that's really exciting.
I love it.
And then, so how do you work? So it sounds like you do this over the phone. You meet
can.
people in person. So
Yes.
you can really do this with anybody, anywhere in the country
Yes. Or the world, really.
or the world.
Yes. I take notes. I can type as fast as a person can write, can speak. I make mistakes and such, but then I go back and I put the stories into literary form, if you'd like, so that they read easily. I use the person's language as much as possible. I got a great compliment from my sister who read one of mine recently, and she said that didn't sound like you at all. And I like that because I'm not writing, it was the woman that I was writing the story for who was telling the story. I wanted it to sound like her. And I've had 100% success with people loving their stories and appreciating what I've done with them.
It sounds like you're a good listener.
I listen. I do. I hear.
You
And-
listen, you hear.
And I'm moved. The stories mean a lot to me too.
Well, that's why you do what you do.
That's right. It's a way to connect with people. It's in a very profound way. I get to know people and their families, and in ways so that if I run into these people later, it's as if we were old friends. You know, I spent a few hours with them, and over the phone perhaps, or in their kitchen table, just for a while. You know, I may spend 4, 5, 6 hours with them total, maybe, and then run into them at the grocery store, and we're very close friends because I see them, I recognize them, I know some wonderful things about them. It's special. It's very special. I love it. I love the work.
You know, one of my theories, I've been talking about it lately, that if everybody got in touch with their gifts, you know, and it's usually what you're passionate about, you know, that not everybody's looking to write down family stories. I mean, I personally have not been looking to do that, and most people don't.
Right.
But you do.
Yes.
So that there is something about honoring your gifts that really brings things to a whole new level. And that if everybody honored their gifts and made their contribution, then the world would work.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, wouldn't that be great? So I really honor you for honoring, you know, these unique talent that you have, because I'm not sure everybody could do that. I would guarantee most people couldn't do it. And that you see the specialness in the stories, you honor the stories, and you honor the family connections. And when you honor something, it grows and it builds.
It does.
You know, it's just even interesting, and like in our conversation today, I think about things, and I think about, you know, what my father was like, or I think about what my mother was like. And depending on the day, it could be positive or it could be negative. But there's something about telling a story and having somebody else listen to the story that has me feel it in a different way and enables me to see something that I really wasn't quite present to. This is the first time I said, oh, I had a dad who wanted to spend Saturday mornings with me and listen to me and tell me his stories. I don't know so much he wanted to listen to me, but he did like to tell his stories. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that, and I still to this day remember that.
I'll write them down, Nancy, if you want. You don't have to.
You know, it's interesting. I think there is something about telling them and documenting stories that is really important. So you've brought that to me today.
Wonderful.
So
I'm glad.
Thank you for doing that. So we have about 1 minute left. Is there anything you want to leave people with?
Just to what we've been talking about all along is really the surprising, actually, value, importance of family stories. That things that we take for granted and expect that are going to be taken for granted forever, that this is a family story and everybody in the family knows it and is always going to know it, that doesn't happen, that life comes along and it cleans the slate. So that if we spend the time with our family members, finding out the stories, it connects us personally with our ancestors and our children, because these stories can go down through the generations. I mean, ideally, these stories will be intact in 200, 300 years. This is be it. The things that people put into their safes, their heirlooms, really. That's wonderful.
Your suggestion.
That's my suggestion.
Get those stories down.
Get those stories down.
That's awesome. So I want to thank you for tuning in today. I'm speaking with Martha Schwope, who is from Cantor, and she is an expert on documenting family stories. I hope you heard something today for you that was meaningful. She gave you some advice. Write them down. Get it set. Don't lose those stories. And if you're moved to get in touch with Martha to find out more about what she does to help you do that, her information will be at the end of the show. I want to thank you for tuning in today. As always, this is the Dream Factory, and we hope that you live your dreams. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.